And you can very easily say America is going through a massive identity crisis right now. Who are we as a nation? What do we stand for? What do we believe in? Because of the outsized influence America has on the world, the rest of the world is wondering, who are we? And how influenced should we be by the US? So you could say America as a country, the whole collective consciousness of America is being completely disturbed. And this karma and reckoning is happening.
So have you had any case where the Vedic astrology chart gave something and then you got a very strong download?
Like, oh my God, how did you know that? Because the universe is constantly communicating. And just last week, I had a client who was born in 1973. And, I was preparing the birth chart ahead of time. And somehow when I put it in the software, and they then influence our mind, and our mind then influences our body, and then we start taking actions and things happen, right? So karma is done with the body, but it's coming from a decision in the mind. And that mind is affected by these energetic fields, right? So yes, the planets are very much alive, and they have personalities and they have characters. And so it turns out the mythology stories are actually patterns of consciousness and energy that when we hear the stories, we get more information beyond the story, and it activates certain consciousness in us. Right. So and the ego is so powerful that we can literally use our mind and our ego to completely go opposite direction from what our soul is trying to do. Right? So soul is trying to evolve in this direction, and we usurp the journey. Like so this is almost like a time where you're separating who are the people who are connected to source and who are not. The people who are not connected to source, they're going to have challenges. The people who are connected to source, they'll find a very peaceful way through it all. And it's interesting.
Hi, this is Akanksshaa. If you're new here, please subscribe to my channel. If you resonate with me, please like, comment, and share. Welcome to Multidimensional Soul Podcast and a talk show. On this, we have with us today Vish Chatterji from the US. Vish is a renowned Vedic astrologer, a Vedic teacher, an executive coach, and a fellow Chopra teacher and a Chopra coach. A very warm welcome, Vish, on Multidimensional Soul Talk Show and a podcast. Namaste, and it's an honor to have you here.
Namaste. Thank you, Akanksshaa. Thank you to all of you that are tuning in and watching. I'm honored to be here and very excited for our conversation.
Yeah, same here. So I understand your background, educational background is an engineering. So how did you get into Vedic astrology and spirituality? Was there a specific event, any turning point, or any deep spiritual experience that inspired you to get into spirituality?
Yeah, so I grew up in an Indian family. So like many of you listening, you see your parents doing certain things. So, but I grew up in Hong Kong. So I grew up outside of India. I was born and raised to a Bengali family in Hong Kong. And in the morning and the evening, my parents would light their dhoop and agarbatti, go around a few times in circles, say a few things, and it was just then special religious occasions we'd go to the temple. But I didn't think much of it. It was just okay. That's the religion of the family, but not anything big for me. Just a custom, you could say. But every morning, I noticed my dad would be doing all these exercises in his room every morning without fail. So even if he went to the bar one night or he went after a big party, came home late, no matter what morning he woke up and he was on his yoga mat, standing on his head, doing sarvangasana, shirsasana, all these things. I was like, Dad, I want to learn yoga. Teach me. Because, he looked very young and very healthy, even in his older age. So, I always equated yoga as this like way to stay healthy and stay young and stay fit. And so I was like, Dad, you have to teach me. I want to learn. And he said, son, look, yoga is not just something you just learn from anybody. You have to find the proper teacher. This is not as if you do it wrong, you do it incorrectly, you're going to hurt yourself, you're going to injure some internal organ or something deeper. So find the right teacher. And when you get older, you go to India, you find the right teacher. So I said, okay, fine. So then when I got older, I finished my college. I went to Northwestern University, did engineering. And as soon as I finished, the first job offer that came that I liked I said, yeah, I'll start, but I'll start in, September. And I was graduating in June. And I said, let me go to India. Let me go and find a teacher. And I wanted to go to Munger, the Bihar School of Yoga, but that was very dangerous at the time. So instead, I headed towards Himalayas, and I end up in Rishikesh, and I end up at the Yoga Niketan Ashram, which is one of the first ashrams, maybe the one next door to Shivananda Ashram. You could say Shivananda was the first yogi to build an ashram in Rishikesh, and next door was Yoga Niketan. So I show up, and morning yoga class, there's this smiling Indian guy in the front who's about my age, didn't speak any English, and I didn't speak any Hindi. So, but his name was also Vish. So I'm like, okay, I'm Vishwajit. He's Vishwaketu. And he just had this laugh, and I became his dear friend. He started teaching me yoga. Within the second day, we were doing Jalaniti, pouring water in our nostrils, cleaning them out. And he became like a brother and a teacher to me. And so for the last 25 years, I've had a proper yoga teacher teaching me yoga. But then I, went into the corporate world. I started my first job. I was an engineer. Then I went to business school, did my MBA, went into corporate executive ranks, ran divisions of companies. And the whole time I was in this corporate climbing success sort of trajectory, I maintained a morning yoga practice. And, Vishwaketu would give me like a 1.5 hour yoga routine. Then my work got busier. And I said, can you make it 1 hour? He said, yeah, sure. He wrote a new routine. Then I said, can you make it 45 minutes? Then finally, the best negotiation I got was down to 15 minutes. So for a long time, I was doing 15-minute morning routine and then going to office. But, the seed is planted. The seed is planted. There's some spiritual underpinning is there, based from dad and from Vishwaketu. Then I was running a startup about 10 years back. And the startup was going through very difficult times. And around that time, Yogrishi Vishwaketu came to town. He came to LA. And he took me to meet this woman, Gurmukh Khalsa. She's a Kundalini yogi. An older woman, but very wise, from years of practice. And she met me and she said, oh, Vishwajit, nice to meet you. She said, where do you teach? Teach? I was like, me? No, I don't teach. I'm a business guy. I run corporations. I start divisions. I quadruple stock prices of companies. Like I'm a business guy. I'm an innovation guy. I don't teach. I run business. But this guy's a teacher. I'm his student. I just learned from him. And she looked at me like I gave the wrong answer, like a kid, second grade. And she's like, you don't teach. You must not die in this life without teaching. You can't just be a student forever. And that was it. Then she went on to get some more food. And I thought, what just happened? And then Vishwaketu looks at me and says, Vishwajit, you do more yoga business now. And I was like, what does that mean? And so these seeds plant, right? And little by little, I started moving deeper into, this corporate executive role was getting very difficult. I became a startup executive. The startup started going through a lot of difficulty. And around that time, somebody asked me to coach them. Oh, okay, coach. Yeah, sure, I can coach. Let me figure out what it is and start coaching. And in that process, I started to realize that I have something very unique to offer, bringing this Eastern spirituality and Vedic tradition that I knew from yoga into executive leadership and coaching. So this is around the time I enrolled at the Chopra Center. I took Ayurveda training, meditation training. I did my final yoga teacher training. And little by little, I started becoming an East meets West coach. Western MBA leadership thinking combined with Vedic personal human development. And that's how I ended up where I am.
Wow. You have had years of practice and training into it. When we look at Western astrology, we have these zodiac sun signs, whereas in Indian astrology, we have moon sign. And Vedic astrology specifically, you have talked about it, that it is a personalized approach for self-discovery. So there are so many different astrology systems. You lived in China. I think China also has their own system. So how is Vedic astrology different from other systems?
It's been an interesting journey for me because I was trained as an engineer. I did my MBA. I worked in the corporate world. So I was always looking for the science and the truth of things. So if somebody said, "Oh, I follow astrology," I would have said that sounds like nonsense. Like, what is that? You tell somebody what month you're born, and all of a sudden they're telling you things. Like if I look at the newspaper horoscope, they all work. It's like you pick a random one, and it's like, oh yeah, that's kind of me. So we were almost self-selecting to a particular sign. And the way the Western astrology is done in pop culture, maybe not a professional astrologer, pop culture, they ask you what month you're born, and in that given month, they say, okay, this is the sign. What they're trying to say is this is the location of the sun in the sky, and behind the sun at that time of year, these star constellations are there, these zodiac constellations are there. But however, the Western system doesn't use math or astronomy that is aligned to the actual sky, right? And, the system of Western astrology, you have to say, derived from somewhere. It didn't just come automatically. And I can trace it back to deriving from the original rishis of India. So in some time after the ice ages, maybe 8,000 years ago, there were these rishis that roamed in the Himalayas, right? In let's say Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, that area, Indus River civilization, you could say. And they had the ability to go into deep states of meditation and communicate with higher power and higher source and almost download knowledge, cognize knowledge systems. And this became a very sophisticated knowledge system that we now refer to as the Vedas. And for generations of insight and debate and development and refinement, the Vedic system came about. And it was an oral tradition that finally, 6,000 years ago, they finally wrote down. But prior to that, it was in existence. And they understood the human journey, the soul journey. They understood what are different lokas and dimensions. They understood what is the yoga system to develop yourself. They understood the Ayurvedic mind-body medicine system, surgical techniques. They understood the effect of the planets and stars on our human existence. But then over time, India was conquered. And by various conquering forces, in order for a small group of people to conquer this massive country, they subjugated the local traditions. They said, "Oh, this is nonsense. You people are studying. This is. Here's a more sophisticated modern system." And so the Western thing came into fashion. So even today in India, I don't know how. I just was in India a few weeks ago. How many times I'm traveling and I go to a jeweler and they're showing me the Western birthstones, and I said, "You're Indian for how many generations? You're through and through fifth generation jeweler, and you're using Western astrology to prescribe stones. Like, why don't you go to your own indigenous tradition that is so old and ancient and sophisticated?" But we almost got corrupted. We look, as Indians, we look at the Western world and we look at very shiny eyes. Oh, they know more than us. But it turns out we knew more, and we had the original systems. And so much so, back to your question, is we use the right math. When we say your sun was in Gemini, you can actually look and see that with a telescope, an astronomer. So a NASA astronomer and a Jyotishi agree on the same locations of everything. Western astrology, I believe, copied the Vedic system at some point about 2,000 years ago. And they used the same math as us 2,000 years ago, but they picked a moving point in space. So the Western astrologers' beginning of the zodiac has drifted over time. So today, if you look at a Western astrology chart and you look at the sky, they don't match. But if you look at a Vedic astrology chart and you look at the sky, it matches. And after all, these systems, yoga, Vedic system, it's all about finding the truth. So start with the truth of the sky. That's the main thing. And as a Westerner in pop culture talks about the sun sign, we focus on what's called the Lagna, the exact star constellation on the eastern horizon, rising at the moment of your birth. That's the most important thing. Then we also look at the moon sign. Where was the moon when you're born? And we also look at nakshatras, which is a whole nother level of sophistication, all using correct math, all connected to mythology, all connected to yoga system, all connected to Ayurveda system, all connected to karma, all connected to reincarnation system. It's very sophisticated versus this sort of pop culture thing, right?
Yeah. So, would you say that the predictions are more accurate? Also, I want to understand the role of astrology from predictions perspective, because as we are ascending, the probable future timelines are fluctuating so much, because right now we are in ascension and the vibration is changing, and that is why people are jumping timelines, and there is so much of shift. So what do you think, and what is your understanding about the predictions that we are giving right?
Mm. Yeah. So, you could almost say that, we have different layers of our being, right? There's a very soul layer, there's obviously the universal soul, Brahman, as it's called in Vedic system. Then there's the collective consciousness, the realm of the lokas and gods and goddesses. Then there's a part of the soul that is connected to us. They're called the Jiva Atman. So it's like, it's the soul, but it has some ego connection. And then there's the ego, right? And the ego is so powerful that we can literally use our mind and our ego to completely go opposite direction from what our soul is trying to do. Right? So soul is trying to evolve in this direction, and we usurp the journey. Like my soul is trying to be a Jyotishi, and instead I'm like, no, I'm going to be a CEO of a company. And I'm just pushing to rise up in the corporate ranks, make more money, more power. And eventually, like, you drift so far apart, you forget who you are, right? So when you do these practices, you start to come back to soul. So, and we understand in the Vedic system that whatever your soul is intending to do is reflected in the heavens at the moment of birth. And so when we cast a horoscope, when we cast a birth chart, we're casting a map of the sky at the moment this soul took an incarnation in this lifetime. And we're then trying to read and interpret what is the soul trying to do. And so a Jyotishi is then looking and saying, okay, here's the map of your soul. Here's what your soul is actually trying to do. Now you may try to force it a different direction. So that can change things, right? Now, the thing is, in Western astrology, because the math is incorrect and is not a soul focused thing, it's an ego focused thing. Like, let's understand your psychology, your personality, your ego. Wherever you've drifted to, let's understand that. Versus Vedic system is trying to correct it. Now, a Western astrologer, a lot of times they have very powerful intuition. They have psychic abilities. A lot of times they have mediumship. So even if the math is incorrect or the chart is incorrect, they still give very accurate understanding because they're connecting to higher source and they're using these powers to give pretty good predictions. Western astrologers are very successful in doing these things, but they're relying on these other powers. But in Vedic astrology, let's say you have no powers. Like I have no powers, nothing special. I'm just an engineer trained. So I add up the logic. And so adding up the logic, you can come to very powerful conclusions without any intuition required. Then you layer on intuition, you layer on abilities, and now you've got superpower, right? In a way. So when it comes to predicting, the prediction is happening partially through the accurate understanding of the planets, the dasha periods, the transits, and knowing that these are the energies at play. But it also depends on the consciousness of the person who you're predicting for. And based on their consciousness, your consciousness astrologer, and whatever higher power is coming through, the different deities are helping, then you can make the accurate prediction, regardless of what's happening ascension-wise or in the universe, right? You go through all that clutter to the truth. Does that make sense?
Yeah. When you just mentioned that when you are doing the reading, let's say for a person, you have a very solid math in the Vedic astrology, and then there is another layer of intuition. So,
Yes.
and you also talked about our rishis cognizing and getting downloads from the universe, from the source. So, have you had any case where the Vedic astrology chart gave something, and then you got a very strong download about that person's chart or anything, and that created a very different kind of impact? So, do you have any
Yeah,
case like that?
definitely. I mean, it happens all the time, right? Because you pull the chart and then these seemingly random events happen around you. A garbage truck goes by, police car goes by, somebody falls down and screams outside, some crow appears in the window. So the universe is constantly trying to send us messages and signals, especially as a Jyotishi. And, we start to say, oh, this interruption, why is it bothering me? But then you have to say, wait a minute, the universe is communicating. Or I'm with a client and they get a text. And then I'm like, well, what is that text you got? And they're like, why are you asking me about my text? I said, it's important. And then they'll say it. I said, oh, this explains this. And like, oh my God, how did you know that? Because the universe is constantly communicating. And just last week, I had a client who was born in 1973. And, I was preparing the birth chart ahead of time. And somehow when I put it in the software, I put in 73, as if they're born in 0073, not 1973. Instead of 1973, I put 0073 somehow. So that's the chart I started analyzing. I'm doing this full analysis on somebody. And then finally, and oh no, it's 73. I put 19. So then I pulled another chart, 1973, and I did that analysis. Then the person came online and they started telling me what their problems are. And I'm looking in the chart and trying to help them understand. And I said, look, I could tell the person was quite spiritually conscious. They had a very regular meditation practice. So I said, I just want to tell you what happened this morning. You're telling me your challenge. I had pulled up the wrong date, 0073, but that chart actually has the clues to your question. So the question they asked, once I looked at the 0073 chart, even though they're not born in 73, I had the exact precise explanation of what was going on in their life. I mean, they were just blown away by it. And now, like, here I am telling you, you have to have the right math. I had the completely wrong math, but it gave me the exact answer I needed. And I was able to give her a very specific remedy and ritual based on that incorrect chart. So you just don't always know. When something happens, you have to learn to just sort of relax a little bit into it. Whatever that chart came, it has some purpose. Even in Vedic astrology, we have a technique called prashna. When somebody asks me a question, if I pull a chart for that moment of the question, often there's an answer very clearly given there. How is that? What is so special at that moment of question? The moment an email arrives in my inbox, that timestamp, I can pull a chart for that moment and get a lot of insight around what's going on for that person. So everything is this divine, sophisticated connection. So the birth chart has value. The moment of the question, prashna chart has value. And even the incorrect chart has value.
Yeah, that's incredible. It's all divinely orchestrated. And these are the synchronicities through which I think, but it's incredible that you got the
Yeah,
answer in the wrong
exactly.
chart.
Divinely orchestrated is a beautiful way to explain it, and it's beyond our understanding because that orchestra is so complex. I can't wrap our minds around it.
Yeah. When we look at the planets in the astrology, and planets are celestial beings, they are not just planets. Like in Hindu, especially Indian scriptures, there are mythological stories of the planets getting angry, or there are all kinds of stories. Like Saturn is known as the planet for karma. How do these planets impact the person's lives, like individual lives, and how are they impacting even the collective consciousness?
If you think of a planet, let's say Mars or Venus or Jupiter or Saturn, they just are a ball of gas and rocks in the sky. That's it, right? It's just this ball of gas. That's like saying you're just a bundle of bones and joints and muscle, right? Are we just bones and joints and muscle? No, there's something else. There's a pranic field. There's energy that animates us at a subtle level. There's a mind. If I say, where's your mind? You can't point to it. Like, where's the mind? Not sure. Is it here? Is it here? Is it there? We don't know. There's a subtle layer of our being. So they call it the Stula Sharir, Shukshma Sharir, Karana Sharir, these different layers: body, mind, soul. There's a soul layer, like we said, Jiva Atman earlier in our conversation today. There's a causal layer, right, where the karma is stored, sanskaras are stored. So same thing, planets, beyond the rocks and gas, there's also a subtle layer. There's also a causal layer. And so the planets interact with us on these very subtle layers of existence. And they then influence our mind, and our mind then influences our body, and then we start taking actions and things happen, right? So karma is done with the body, but it's coming from a decision in the mind. And that mind is affected by these energetic fields, right? So yes, the planets are very much alive, and they have personalities and they have characters, and it's hard to explain them. This science of what a planet is doing is very hard to explain. So what our ancients came up with is mythology. They say it's a myth. It's not a myth. It's an energetic signature pattern. So when we tell a story of, oh, Shani was chained up by Ravana in his house, and Hanumanji showed up and rescued Shani, and therefore if you worship Hanuman, Shani will release his, karma and pain on you. These kind of things. It sounds like an innocent story, but it's explaining a very complex energetic pattern. And beyond the words of the story, there's an energetic transmission of information that opens up a certain consciousness. So it turns out the mythology stories are actually patterns of consciousness and energy that when we hear the stories, we get more information beyond the story and it activates certain consciousness in us. So even in a reading, when I tell a specific story, there's a transmission of energy that's happening beyond the story. There's a change happening. So these, mythology is not the correct word. They're living, they're happening now. And how many times I look at their chart, I hear the story of the mythology, I start telling them the story, and they're like, "Oh my God, that's happening in my life." How many times they're telling me their life story, and I'm saying, "Oh my God, I know this story. I've heard it before. I know where it's going." So I can make a prediction of somebody's life because I've already seen the story before, right? So very powerful. Our stories are extremely powerful.
Yeah, they have a lot of hidden knowledge included in those stories.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Right now, as we are ascending, we are going in fifth dimension. And so there are differences of opinion. Some say that there is going to be a split, 3D Earth versus 5D Earth, not physical split, but vibrational shift. And when the vibrational split is going to be there, the 5D Earth will not have any karmic cycles because people have finished karmic cycles and they have ascended there. And 5D is beyond time space. So, what is your understanding of karmic cycles and destiny in the ascension, especially? And are we going to have more free will and no longer kind of getting entangled in the karmic cycles?
I don't know. I don't have a lot of knowledge on the ascension concept and these different cycles and all that. But I do feel like the ancient Vedic people had understood all of these things. They understood what cycle, what dimension. We call them lokas a lot of times, right? There's a Pitri loka, there's a Devi loka, there's a Bhu loka, different planes of existence. And, we come to different planes to do different work. Right? When you come to Bhuloka, which is Earth, it's like a Disneyland. You have to go on a bunch of rides, and every ride you go on, you work through karma. And some rides are fun, some rides are terrifying, but you're working through your karma at that time. But when you go to other lokas, there's no karmic work to be done. Those are more different planes. So what I find is, just like in yoga, people get obsessed with the body, and it becomes a physical workout, gymnastics on the mat, and they forget about the karmic work that's taking place with the whole yoga system. There's Ashtanga, 8 limbs of yoga, they're only focused on asana. So same thing in astrology, it has become something that's become very intellectual focused. And they forgot about the other planes, the other existence that we have. So Jyotishis tend to get very intellectual and they argue and debate all these things at the mental level, but they forget about the full being, the body, mind, and soul, right? So I feel like with our limited minds, we're trying to grasp and trying to make these different frameworks to understand things. Oh, there's a 5D this and 3D this is happening and that. But we're just like, it's like the elephant and we've seen the trunk and we're like, okay, the whole thing is the trunk. Then somebody is at the tail saying, oh, this is the tail. Somebody's at the leg and saying, this is the whole elephant. But we're not able to step out and say, wait a minute, there's a whole system here. And I'm sure these were described in ancient times, but who has the text? Who can interpret the text? Who has, the people who are scholars? Do they have the consciousness to understand beyond the stories? So this is where it becomes very tricky. And, I'm also like in this field, I'm into Jyotish. Like that is my interest, is helping people understand themselves. So when I look at a Jyotish chart, I'm trying to help that person in this life, in this particular struggle that they're in this lifetime, in this earth, right? Somebody starts saying, okay, what will happen? Where will the earth go? To me, it's like, it's beyond the service of that particular person's journey right now. So I haven't spent a lot of time in those areas, Akanksshaa.
Okay. When you talked about planets impacting individual and collective consciousness, right now there are so many things happening in the world, and especially after 2020, there have been major shifts in the world. Like after COVID, it's like the entire world landscape itself has changed. The consciousness has changed. In this chaos, what is happening exactly astrologically, and which country is going to lead? Is there any one country who's going to lead in this? And what are the predictions? Because 2025 to 2032, there are predictions that a lot of economies are going to go down, and financial systems are going to be disrupted, and governments are going to be disrupted, and there's a lot of chaos that is predicted, because it's all coming to surface for it to get healed in the collective consciousness, is my understanding. So what is your understanding in this 2025 onwards, the shift that we are seeing?
The challenge is that in 2020, there's a very specific activation of a couple of nakshatras. So we have to understand nakshatras. Nakshatras are these, so we have 12 zodiac signs, right? We go from Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, and so forth. And those came from Vedic system. There we had Sanskrit names for those, Mesha, keeps on going, Meena, all those. But then we also divide the sky into 27 sections, which are known as nakshatras. And a lot of times it's where the moon is located. So when they say your birth star, your Janma nakshatra, it is where is the moon? What nakshatra was it in at the time of your birth? So then, out of the 27 nakshatras, each one has a very specific mythological story. And those mythological stories start to explain the nakshatra. Meanwhile, you have planets moving through the sky, and there's two shadow planets called Rahu and Ketu. And Rahu and Ketu are sort of chaos agents. They're asuric forces. They create a lot of chaos. And when they go into certain nakshatras that are also ruled by Rahu and Ketu, they create a lot of problem. And Rahu and Ketu were lined in a nakshatra called Ardra and Mula. Ardra and Mula in 2020. And the story of that is when this big fire puja was being held by Daksha Prajapati, he held this huge yagya to get more power. And he decided not to invite his daughter, because his daughter was married to this very uncouth fellow who meditated in the cremation grounds, wore a loincloth, covered himself in human ash, and had this entourage of ghouls and goblins. This is Lord Shiva. So Daksha Prajapati, I'm not inviting this guy Shiva because he thinks he's the Supreme Lord. And when he comes, biggest problem is he's going to come, looking uncouth, but he won't touch my feet. He won't bow down to me, so I'm going to ignore him. And I'm not inviting my daughter. So he started his yagya. So then the wife, the daughter of Daksha Prajapati, Sati, came to Lord Shiva and tried to disturb and say, come on, my father's having this puja. He didn't invite us. I'm so insulted. And Shiva is meditating. He's like, don't bother me. I'm meditating. I don't care. I'm not invited. Doesn't matter. Let them do what they're doing. So, but she decided to go. And when she showed up, her father insulted her. And she was so upset and insulted that she jumped into the fire. She's a goddess. And she, burned and ruined the whole puja. But the moment she left her mortal body, Shiva then woke up from his meditation. And he got furious. And he started raging and stomping and destroying. So he showed up the yagya and started stomping, destroying, punching, kicking, destroying. And from him emerged Kal Bhairavi, like the Kali form from his hair. And they both proceeded to destroy everything. Ardra is the nakshatra connected to this destruction on the male side. And Mula is connected to the destruction of the female side. Mula's deity is Niriti, who's very similar to Kali, and Ardra's deity is Rudra, who is the fierce form of Shiva that appeared. So when Rahu and Ketu activated in these two locations, it's like this whole thing started for us as humanity. And in the US, this happened on the Lagna of the US birth chart. So from that moment, this destruction of all traditions, destruction of all, Daksha Prajapati is like, we must do the ritual this way. We won't invite this person. Like this whole thing got upended. And so this destruction period is what we're in now. This aftermath of the puja being desecrated. So how long does it take to come out of that becomes the big question. In the whole cycles, this is just a temporary blip. But for us humans, it's like, okay, this is a part of our collective karma. We have to live through this. And since that time, we've been dealing with these effects. Now, at some point, things are restored, right? So eventually, Vishnu came in, he chopped up the body parts of Sati. Each body part fell to a Shakti Peeth. Those body parts were cremated. Then Shiva was pacified. Then Parvati came, he remarried. And once he was with Parvati, the restoring happened. So as these planets move out, eventually that peace will come, but you still have to go through the pain. And what has to be done is the proper burial of the proper cremation, proper saying goodbye of things that don't serve us anymore. Now, as a spiritual person, whatever is happening chaos-wise, there's an opportunity to go deeper in your sadhana. Because you realize it's all a Maya. It's all, the whole thing is an illusion, right? So this is almost like a time where you're separating who are the people who are connected to source and who are not. The people who are not connected to source, they're going to have challenges. The people who are connected to source, they'll find a very peaceful way through it all. And it's interesting, I'm telling you the story, there's someone outside cutting concrete, like destroying literally the road behind me. I'm thinking, what a timing. And again, there's a nimitta, the universe communicating, say, hey, some destruction has to happen. But when they break the road, eventually the road becomes chaos, bumpy, rocky, dusty, painful, suspension getting damaged, but eventually the road gets fixed and then you pass through with smoothness, right?
Yeah. So how long will this go on? Because we are already in this chaos for quite some time now. And what is your understanding? How long is it going to go on? And are there going to be institutions who are going to collapse? What is going to happen? What more is going to happen, especially in 2025?
Yeah, so this is a field called mundane astrology, the general affairs of the world, right? And I look at humans always, like my focus is on human beings. Like how do I help a human being on their spiritual journey and their awakening, you could say. But you can say, let me pull the birth chart of a country. So for instance, okay, let's look at America. What is America's birth chart? Pull that chart and then make a prediction around what will happen in America. And, I could pull a chart for India, I could pull a chart for China, but, I'm living in America. And America has such an outsized influence on the whole world's affairs.
Yeah.
And America is going through what is called Sade Saati. Sade Saati. This is when Saturn, Shani, the planet of karma, goes over the moon, which is the planet of the mind. So in Sade Saati, people who are not spiritually oriented, their mind gets very disturbed. So you could say America as a country, the whole collective consciousness of America is being completely disturbed. And this karma and reckoning is happening. And we're about halfway through that process, and Sade Saati is about 7.5 years. So minimum there's 3-4 years to go in America, which then influences the world. And Sade Saati for a human being is the time when it's asking, who are you really? What do you really stand for? What is your true identity underneath it all? So you could say for many people, Sade Saati is an identity crisis. And you can very easily say America is going through a massive identity crisis right now. Who are we as a nation? What do we stand for? What do we believe in? And because of the outsized influence America has on the world, the rest of the world is wondering, who are we? And how influenced should we be by the US? Right? So this is the time where every country on the planet is figuring out, do we want to be dependent on this character? And America is saying, who are we as a character? And so all of that is going to come out. And, we're going to have to make a choice. Like America has to make a choice. What do we stand for? What do we believe in? What do we respect? What institutions do we like? What institutions do we not like? And the rest of the world is going to say, what new institutions do we need because we don't like this institution or we like this institution, right? So there's a real recorrection, you could say, a recorrection. And so as an individual, you should also ask, what do you stand for? What is your truth?
So there are some remedies that are suggested for individuals who are going through these challenges and some solutions. And usually there are some mantras also or chants that are suggested. So if you were to give something to the audience right now, what can you suggest? What do they need to do to stay centered and go through these challenging times with ease and grace?
Yeah. So as you correctly said, Saturn is a planet of karma. And Saturn is also a planet that gives very challenging karma. It is there. Saturn is there to purify you at the end of the day. So we have this concept in Vedic system where there's a celestial accountant called Chitragupta. And Chitragupta, is sort of with a clipboard. And when you die and you show up, he looks at the clipboard and says, okay, Akanksshaa, here's the good things you did. Oh, you did a nice podcast. You helped many people have consciousness. Okay, great. Oh, you didn't help that person. Okay, then, you this balance sheet. And so based on your balance sheet at Chitragupta's station, you get sent to the next place. But Chitragupta's partner is Shani, Saturn. And Saturn walks beside you through life, giving you just amount of pain to improve your balance sheet, to refine and pay off karmas. So Shani is not necessarily a bad planet. It's just a karmic refining planet. And if you keep Shani happy, then he gives a little bit of relief on that purification process. And Shani loves discipline. Shani is also the keeper of time. Discipline, time, focus, persistence, determination, slow and steady. That's what Saturn likes. So anytime you want to deal with Saturn, you need some kind of discipline that happens at the same time on a regular basis in a determined, persistent, consistent way. So it doesn't matter the remedy. That's the first thing. It has to be done in a very disciplined way. So at a minimum, pick a time. 5 a.m., 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 8 a.m., whatever. That's the time. Then pick a practice and stick to it. Don't say, oh, today I'll do this, tomorrow I'll do that. 1 year now I've found something else. Pick one and stick with it, right? And then do it the same number. If you say, okay, I'm going to chant this mantra 108 times, do it 108 times. Don't fail. If you decide I'm going to fast on Saturdays, fast on Saturday. But you have to do it, right? So one of the remedies for Saturn is also to worship Hanuman. Right? And the reason was because Ravana, in his brilliance, Ravana was also a brilliant yogi, but fallen from grace. He said, in order to have more power, I need a good horoscope. So let me capture all the planets and chain them in different places in my palace. And by chaining up these different planets in the right location, I'll have the best horoscope. So, like, he captured Lord Shani, put Lord Shani in a good position. He captured Mars, put him in this position, Jupiter in this position. And he's like, look, I have this great horoscope. So when Hanuman landed in Lanka, he arrived and saw Shani chained up. And Shani's like, I'm stuck here. And Hanuman's like, you're stuck? Oh my gosh, let me help you. So, Hanuman took his club and cut the chains and freed Shani. And Shani said, oh, you freed me. Because you freed me, I will free anybody who worships you from my chains. So the moment you worship Hanuman, Saturn says, okay, I'm going to give you a little bit of ease. And Saturday, Shani's day is Saturn day. Shanivar, Saturday, Saturn day. That's the day of Saturn. So one very easy remedy is to at least listen and chant along to Hanuman Chalisa at the same time every Saturday. If you have minor problems, listen to it on Saturday once a week. If you're in a Shani Dasha or Shani return or Sade Saati, Saturn involved. If you have severe problem, then do it every single day. That would be one very easy remedy. Or even a very simple mantra to Hanuman is Om Hanu Hanumate Namaha. Chant that 108 times daily. That'll help. But discipline is important. And the other remedy for Shani is quiet and slow. The quietest, slowest thing you could do is to meditate. Meditate requires you to be still, quiet, disciplined. Meditation requires silence and stillness and discipline. It's a very hard practice, those who try it. So meditate every day, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, same time, same amount, same technique. The consistency also helps Saturn. And if you have Saturn over the moon is the mind. Saturn is discipline. You're disciplining the mind through meditation. So that's also a very good remedy for Sade Saati.
Yeah. Any other deities that you suggest that we can pray to? There is something called as Ishta Devata also, wherein that deity is favoring that person because of the connection at the consciousness level. So can you talk a little bit about deities that we have and how can they impact us?
And you said the word Ishta Devata, is that? Okay. Yeah, are you hearing this background noise or is it getting
Yeah,
filtered out?
I am listening.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's pretty loud. Yeah, but I hope everyone's able to hear me. Again, some karma is there, some destruction has to happen. So deities, yeah, deities are very important. In fact, Jyotish, the word Jyotish is the combination of the word Jyotir and Isha. Jyotir is light, Isha is consciousness or God. So at the end of the day, when you're looking at the Jyotish chart, when you're looking at a horoscope, when you're looking at Vedic astrology, you're seeing how are the deities functioning. How are the deities functioning in this person's life? And usually, when there's an imbalance, you use the deities to help correct those balances. Somebody has a problem with money or income or love. That planet is Venus. Venus is connected to Lakshmi. You do some Lakshmi worship, it gets improved. Now people say, okay, but I'm a Christian or I'm a Muslim or I'm some other faith. I don't believe in that. That's fine. The Vedic system existed before Hinduism. So the Vedic system, 8,000, 10,000 year old tradition, they understood these archetypes of energy. And they knew that our human mind couldn't comprehend energetic patterns. So there were stories and these archetypal deities that help you focus your energy in the right way to affect a certain change, right? So if you think about Lord Ganesh, elephant deity, elephant head on a human body, elephants remove obstacles. Just by thinking of Ganesh, you're activating a certain archetype that activates an energy in you that heals that particular area, right? It's an archetypal energy. And it's a being that exists that we're connected to through that form and understanding. Then let's say after, let's say 5,000 years ago, Hinduism developed. So the Hindus became a child of the Vedic tradition. Hinduism spawned from the original Vedic tradition, and Hinduism became a religion. And in the religion, you do this, don't do this, worship this, do this practice. And Hindus unknowingly are tapping into the same energies the Vedic people were tapping into. So many of the rituals of Hinduism are similar to the ancient Vedic rituals. So in a way, you can give credit to the Hindus for preserving this very sophisticated way of understanding, right? Then from Hinduism, of course, there's many branches that came out, different systems, right? The Sikh system, the Buddhist system, the Islam, all of these things. They're very specific activations and connections to God. So any religion, you're reaching divine source. But if you need a remedy in a particular area of life, that sort of one divinity is not enough fidelity to shift that particular specific energy that you need in life, right? So this is why the archetypes become very powerful. And so if you pick a certain form or devata, it's much more activating in your life, right? Like if somebody who is a Catholic says to me, look, I'm having trouble with women in my life and they're not comfortable worshiping Lakshmi or Kali or Durga, then I'll say, okay, pick Mother Mary, right? Light a candle to Mother Mary, say her prayer, say your Hail Marys. It'll have a similar effect, right? If somebody is Muslim, they say, look, I don't worship idols at all. Then use some of those mantras, some of those beautiful, shlokas, or they have a different word, but use those beautiful prayers because they activate energy beyond. But the specific deities are much more targeted. I need to remove an obstacle. Ganesh is a targeted approach. It's like, if I need a new driver's license, I'm not going to knock on the White House door and say, hey, Donald Trump, I need a new license, right? I have to go to the Department of Transportation and I have to go to that secretary in that state, right? So there's a department. So each of these deities are different departments. And some of us, in our heart, we feel a natural connection to one department. Oh, I really like the tax department, or oh, I really like the transport department, or like that. So some people say, I feel really connected to Shiva, or really connected to Vishnu, or I feel very connected. So trust your heart. Sometimes people come to me and say, what is my Ishta Devata? I can look in the chart and I can see one. So if somebody doesn't know, they don't have that natural connection, you can figure it out from the chart. But if you already have a calling and in your heart, you feel so connected to Hanumanji or to Lakshmi or to Kartikeya or one of these, Durga, Kali, or your family is connected, might as well connect to that. It's there. Don't ask a Jyotishi to overrule your own intuition. And so working with a personal deity becomes important because you develop this relationship. And I know the logic of it. Akanksshaa, you know the feeling of it. if I light a diya and I offer it to Durga, and I say, Om Dum Durga Ye Namaha, Durga, please help me. There's an energy that comes nearby, and an energy that's activating the moment you light a diya, the moment you light an agarbatti, the moment you offer a flower, the moment you say the mantra. There's this active thing that comes around. And people like you are sensitive. They feel that. They feel like, oh, something has come, right? And if they keep coming little by little, they start to shift the karmic energy in your life. They shift you at the causal level, and then change starts to happen in your life in a miraculous way. Miraculous way. Somebody has an obstacle, they have no way around it. They start doing some Ganesh mantra, they start doing some offering to Ganesh, and that obstacle clears. And what I found interesting is when I give these so-called Vedic Hindu type remedies to a Western person, when they start, they have miraculous results. When I give it to a Hindu person, it doesn't seem to work as well. This has been very interesting for me to observe. Why is it that a Westerner, it works so miraculously, and for an Indian, it seems to not work? And what I'm coming to the theory is the Westerner is coming completely clean, never approached before. They come with total sincerity, total devotion, no preconceived notion. And that deity says, I better give this gal or guy a good experience because they're coming new. So let me give them something. But in Indian system, our ancestors worshipped, and then we stopped. If you look at modern India, we just stopped. Barely wave an agarbatti. Barely, right? So our ancestors did all these things, had such a good relationship with the deities. And then last generation, we said, let's stop. I don't believe in that stuff anymore. So now we've come into a deficit. So when an Indian starts, little by little, they try to climb out of the hole. Whereas the Westerners at a even plane. So I feel like if you are coming from Hindu tradition, you're at a bit of a deficit if you've given up what your ancestors did. So when you start these rituals, you have to do them little by little and dig up to level. And when the level happens, then you'll notice things take off pretty quick. And it's very important you practice the rituals at some level that your ancestors practiced. That becomes very important. Whatever your religion tradition is, you have to do something that your ancestors did. So if your parents did it and your grandparents did it, you have to honor that. That's for sure. Yeah.
Okay. How can people connect with you?
Best way is to go on the website, vishchatterji.com, or I'm on Instagram at Vish Chatterji.
Okay, we'll provide all the links in the description. It's absolutely an honor and pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Akanksshaa. Namaste. What a fantastic conversation. Really enjoyed this space we created.
Thank you.
And namaste to all of you listening.
Thank you for watching and listening in wherever you are in the world. As Ramdas says that we all are just walking each other home. So thank you for co-creating the new earth along with me and our guests. And if you resonate with me, do subscribe to my channel and do let us know how you find our episodes. Thank you so much. Lots of love.